Hello everybody, CritCrab here with the epic conclusion to my last video. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend going and checking that out now. I'll link it up in the corner or description or something. To summarize what happened last video for those who may have forgot, OP and his girlfriend played D&D with a horrible group, went home. OP discovered that his girlfriend took the horrible DMing pretty hard, so he went New Vegas Boon mode in an attempt to overthrow the current DM and replace him. Anyways, I present to you the power struggle minus the power. Roll post. So, not to get into much detail, but Oldboy managed to injure himself. Badly. I'm not celebrating or anything because he sent us the pictures and it was gross. And when I tell this story to people, I have to vehemently deny being a part of it. I'm not the Godfather, and my stated vendetta would never have led to me actually doing anything as awful as what happened to him. It was much like how Oldboy ultimately lost his D&D group, purely self-inflicted. What the injury did mean was that Oldboy needed to take time for himself and reorganize his life, which left my friend Artist an opportunity to DM. I talked the group into meeting on weekends, a time that was not good for Oldboy, since he worked then. I said it would be better because the man needed time to heal, so we started playing the usual weekday and one day on the weekends. Artist didn't run Tomb of Annihilation like he talked about before, but started his own campaign. To be honest, it started fairly lukewarm, though even that was better than Oldboy's campaign. But with enough time and prodding in the right direction, the campaign became downright awesome. Artist constantly improved his miniatures and terrain and started using Pathfinder material, which was tough but constantly interesting. What did bog it down was Oldboy coming back from the hospital as a player. I figured it couldn't be as bad as him DMing, and I was right, but we still got moments like him saying, "I did the math and my Turtle Wizard's IQ is about 162. That's only a few points less than mine." Unironic, unprompted, completely serious. Okay, dude. He also had a tendency to shut down everyone else's fun or do a behavior that would be destructive to the party long term, saying, "Well, I have a reptile intelligence, so your concepts of right and wrong aren't the same as mine." Somewhere down the line, Artist took over on weekdays and I took over on weekends. I compiled the likes and dislikes of the group I was now a part of and crafted a campaign I thought they would like. We're still playing it to this day, and it's been a wild and fun ride. I worked with them to come up with more detailed character backstories that integrated them with the world, so I could deliver payoffs in the main plot down the line. And although it started a bit railroady, I opened it up into a wider continent where the players have free reign. I'm basically trying to show them what a good campaign looks like. In talking to the other players one-on-one, I would wait weeks or months for moments when I could encourage them to do one-shots or even start campaigns of their own. The big hurdle, as you might guess, was Oldboy. Oldboy had a habit as a player to criticize whatever choice the DM made, disrespecting them and putting them down. At the time, I was trying to end Oldboy's whole DM career, and even I was way more quiet and respectful than he was as a player. The other players, naturally, didn't want to even try DMing while he was a player. Eventually, when Artist was feeling burnt out and Oldboy was feeling better, they agreed to let Oldboy take over again. During the week, he was going to start a new campaign, a sequel to the last one that never got a conclusion. We would all be level 1, and I started to scream internally. How could none of them see yet? How could none of them realize how bad that old campaign was and how much better things were now? Was this just going to keep going on and on forever? I started giving in to despair, not just because he was going to DM again, but because I might have been wrong the whole time. Oldboy was cantankerous and mean-spirited, but the group called him a friend and played his games. They didn't see anything wrong with it. I was months into playing with this group, solely on a quest for silly and petty revenge, but the obvious was becoming clear. I was the guy with the problem. I might just be ruining everyone else's fun, and using them for my own selfish purposes. And against what? An old man who hurt himself really badly and doesn't really have that much in his life besides D&D? I suddenly felt like scum and decided I would just sit back and enjoy the ride. Oldboy was a part of the group as much as anyone else, and even if I didn't like his campaigns, everyone else did. So I would be their friend, I would be their DM, I'd be their fellow player, and I'd let the chips fall wherever they did. And boy did they when the new campaign hit. End post. So in this penultimate part, we found out that OP was on the path to cool down, realize how petty he was being, and take a few steps back. He spent so long starting fires he couldn't stop and look past the smoke. It must have been a relieving moment, realizing he no longer needed to carry the weight of the group on his shoulders, but that would only last so long. We have one more part in which OP and the rest of the group's patience is pushed to its absolute limit. Roll post. Part 4 of 4. So we were back where we started. Oldboy had his DM Reins back, and I was gearing up for the sequel of the campaign I never got to destroy. I was still DMing on the weekends, but I had given up my vendetta. We go to roll up characters, the way Oldboy did it this time because he thought it would be interesting. We begin by declaring our class, then we roll our stats in order. Strength to Charisma 3d6. Then we roll a race randomly. The party fighter was a goblin with 4 in strength and a 4 in dexterity. To make up for it, every level we would have one stat increased by 1, randomly. This was the kind of absurdity I was expecting, but it came in at session 0. The campaign backstory is the DM NPC figured out the main quest in the old campaign, martyred himself to save the world, and all of the kings and spellcasters loved the DMPC so much that they tore a rift in space and time to get him back. Instead of, casting resurrection or something. Which then caused all non-monstrous races to disappear for some reason, and made everyone else really weak, except the monsters we were fighting, who were modified to be even stronger because of the DM's repeated power complex. Oh, and our characters from the last campaign? They wandered off north somewhere. Not kidding, all the players got shafted in the prologue, and the DMPC became Jesus, and start. Our first session made me want to never play D&D again. It was not just the worst session Oldboy had done, it may be the worst session of all time. We were in this aqueduct, following a quest from our employer, and these Kruthiks were raising the dead. Oh, cool, I thought, like chrysalids from XCOM. We got slaughtered by zombies because we were level 1 and our stats were garbage. I had one first level spell prepared because I rounded up. I was an Earth Genasi Artificer with an intelligence of 8, so I had my character hit things with rocks until they worked. As we were all pulling ourselves up, the Kruthiks retreated. We got a long rest in and went deeper. The inside of the aqueduct was a series of turbines leading the currents of water in different directions without any walls between them. The water would travel up and down passageways, but it was never consistent. It became obvious that knowing the water routes was key to understanding the puzzle and how to proceed. One player decided to draw a map of the currents. It took all night and was like watching paint dry. I have never been so bored. The player in question asked how the turbines were turning and how the water was flowing in what must have been a dozen or so more empty passages. Then he showed his map to Oldboy and asked, "Is this right?" "No," said Oldboy. I wanted to die. We tried breaking the walls, but they repaired themselves. We tried sticking things in the turbines, but something on the other side grabbed them and pulled them underneath. We tried to see what that thing was, but couldn't. We ended the session and nothing happened. At the start of the next session, my character said, "I'm sorry, but I would like to be literally anywhere else," and we never went back. Oldboy told another player in private that we were too underleveled for there anyway, which begs the question, why we got a quest to go there. But it wasn't just that, oh no. The bandits we were told to clear out, an army of orcs riding wargs with goblin archers behind a wall too far away to reach. A disturbance in the mines, vampires. The one thing we actually fought that was actually possible was across the country. It was a haunted farmhouse. It had 4 scarecrows that were immune to everything except fire damage that destroyed every trace of them. And the farmers who called their own farm haunted required hard evidence in order for us to receive payment. Funny that it got us to level 2. While I was in the car with one of the other players, I struck up a conversation about the campaign and said it was interesting, but I thought it was a little unfair. And for the first time, the player went off. He started talking about, what does Oldboy expect us to even do, and all sorts of other fun things that made my heart pound. I tried and got similar results from other members of the group. Then, COVID hit, and the whole thing had come to a complete stop. It had started trickling into our city, but hadn't blown up yet. So we had one last weekend game together, no Oldboy, to say goodbye for a while. Everyone was super frustrated at Oldboy's game and him. Granted, I did a little bit of nudging, but the irritation came together all on its own. Coincidentally, during this time, Oldboy texted us. He worked a transportation job, interacting with a lot of people, and said something along the lines of, "Lol, I've had flu-like symptoms for like a week or two." Firstly, he knew about that and was still driving people. Secondly, he knew about that and still played D&D with us. Thirdly, several of us were vulnerable or had vulnerable relatives, and he knew that. Organically and without my prompting, one of the players said, "So, are we kicking Oldboy out then?" And it was an awkward but resounding yes. We played on Roll20 for like a year, during which time I admitted to the group why I joined them initially. I said if they wanted to kick me out for being manipulative, that's fine, but I was really angry at Oldboy and wanted to get him back. Then I made some great friends and regretted using them like I did. I asked for their forgiveness and was shocked to hear several of them tell me that it was good that I worked to separate them from Oldboy, because he turned out to be a dick all on his own. My petty vengeance wound up executed by the very guy who prompted my ire. As self-destructive as he was arrogant, I almost wonder if the group leaving him was inevitable, and I was just a catalyst. Or maybe I didn't end up accomplishing anything at all. But I do have a D&D group I enjoy playing with, a girlfriend I love who laughed at my D&D stories with me each night, and a pretty damn good life despite the times. Now that we're slowly meeting in person again, I find myself eager for the weeks to come. End post. So the first thing I want to point out is I think both OP and Oldboy were acting like complete immature children. If you're going to waste valuable time, at the very least several weeks, probably months, dedicated to undermining a crappy DM, that's just kind of sad. What makes it weirder is that they seem to be doing just fine after the first session. They understood that the session and DM sucked and they were just gonna move on. But because of a crappy DM's perceived slights, OP decides to go in on him? I believe OP when he says that this was probably inevitable, though I do think he accelerated it by a lot. According to the posts made, Oldboy was going to have to either improve or get left behind eventually. I don't say this about many DMs or players, but the way he ran games was just objectively bad. All in all, this was completely unnecessary, though it was fun to read, and I'm glad it got a good enough ending. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. Till next time.